The Major 1 qualifiers are done. They're in the books and we're moving on to Major 1. So that's why in today's video, I'm going to be doing an updated power ranking / tier list video for you guys. And it gets a little crazy. All right, well, look, I'm just going to cut straight to the point. The best team in the game in the S tier, none other than Atlanta FaZe. All of you guys out there know what Atlanta FaZe is capable of. They've been the most dominant team the past couple years. And while they started off slow, I would say, in Vanguard, they've reached their form. Not their final form, but they're back to their standards where we've seen in the past couple years. The second best team in the game, this might be a surprise to some of y'all. Some of y'all might think that it is a fair assessment. It is the Los Angeles Thieves, and I also have them joining FaZe in the S tier. Now, just to give you guys a little context with this tier list, the S tier for me going into Major 1, these are the favorites to win the tournament. I think it's fair to put LAT in that category. We're talking about the best hardpoint team in the game. If not, if you want to argue that they aren't the best, they're hands down the second best hardpoint team in the game. Now, they did finish the qualifiers 2-4 in S&D and 3-2 in control. So they're not as well-rounded as a team like Atlanta FaZe. But the thing about LAT is because they're so dominant in hardpoint, and their overall team KD in their hardpoint matches in the qualifiers was only like a 1.03. So what that tells me is they really understand the right way to play hardpoint in Vanguard, and that their pacing is where it needs to be. And I know people might say, oh, well, FaZe beat LAT in hardpoint. They did. I think that series, if we see them go up against each other in the Major 1, it is really going to come down to vetoes, because both teams are very good at hardpoint and they're both good at very different maps. So only time will tell, but LAT number 2. Now this might be a shocker to some because I do talk about them quite a bit, but number 3 also in the S tier, I have Optic'S Texas. They started out rough in the qualifiers, okay? Going 0-2, they stormed back. They finally figured out what they need to do to close these games out. They won 3 straight in pretty dominant fashion as well. So this Optic team could have easily went 5-0. They could have been right there with FaZe with the flawless record, but they were able to bounce back, okay? They were able to fight through their adversity, and their wins as of late to end the qualifiers have been very, very flawless. They're kind of heating up at the right time for this major. I'm excited to see what they can do, but they are definitely a favorite heading into Major 1. And what a monumental jump for the London Royal Ravens, because I currently have them at my number 4. Unfortunately, they're not going to be in the S tier. They will be the first team in the A tier. And for more context, before I get roasted, I said the S tier were the favorites, in my opinion, going into Major 1. Every team that you see in the A tier, I think can definitely win the event, but I wouldn't bet on it. But London has been nothing short of unbelievable. They were very good in the qualifiers. They went 4-1, okay? From top to bottom, you know, they were all kind of having standout games, standout series, especially the new kids on the block. You know, Gizmo looked great. Nasty looked great. I'm excited to see how they perform on LAN. I think that's the biggest thing for me, okay? Because they have these young guns. The only one really with that LAN experience, that LAN environment, that tournament experience is Zero. And I just have to see. I have to see how they perform going forward on LAN. Because online, it shows a little bit, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Toronto Ultra, though, number 5. Also in the A tier. I had them at number 1 after the Kickoff Classic because they obviously won it and they looked great. But as of late, not so much. They went 0-2 in the last week of qualifiers. And I'll be honest, something just looked off to me. I can't put my finger on it, but it wasn't the same Toronto Ultra that we're normally seeing in these matches. Now, they weren't horrible. They were pretty close though. But I just feel like they've kind of regressed. You know, they're basically at the 500 mark in all 3 game modes. And we're normally seeing them, you know, top the leaderboards in S&D, be competitive in the other 2 modes. and they're not the worst, but it's just not Toronto Ultra like. So I have them at number 5. Following them up at number 6, I have the Seattle Surge, another team. Toronto and Seattle were in the finals at the Kickoff Classic, but they kind of just fell out flat at the end of the qualifiers. They went 0-2 in the last week as well. And something that I think goes unnoticed is if accuracy didn't clutch up in those 2 series, they easily could have went 1-4. And the last 2 series they played in the qualifiers, it wasn't close to teams that they should have beat. So they're in the same boat with Toronto Ultra for me, where maybe they're regressing a little bit. I still think that these guys have a solid shot at winning the event, but they need to heat back up because they are colder than a penguin's ass in Antarctica right now. And it is not the time, especially because the first major event of the year is coming up. Number 7, and the first team in the B tier, I have the Los Angeles Guerrillas, and you guys might not agree with me, but just hear me out. LAG finished the qualifiers 7-2 in hardpoint. I have them as a top 3 hardpoint team in the game, and while their other 2 modes are pretty poor, I believe they're 2-5 in S&D, 1-4 in control. It goes back to the same thing that I said about LAT. When you are so dominant in hardpoint, okay, you have that mode twice in one series. So there's a good chance that they're going to be able to pressure whoever they go up against by starting up 1-0, okay? Or they have that kind of safety net if it goes map 4 and they're up in the series. Now, they're in the B tier for this reason. These are teams that I think could do really well, could be competitive with any teams above them, but I don't think they have a chance to actually win the event. And then we have Boston Breach coming in at number 8, also in the B tier. This is a team I've had, some words about, I guess. I feel like they were kind of overrated in the beginning of the game and, after the Kickoff Classic. Not saying they were bad by any means, because I think they're very solid, but I think this team has a very low ceiling compared to the majority of the other teams in the league. And their bread and butter didn't look so hot in their last match versus NYSL in S&D. They're not like intimidating, you know what I mean? Like, they have good players, they do, but I don't think that they have a chance to compete with the best of the best. Number 9, the Florida Mutineers, also in the B tier. This team is a team that makes deadass 0 sense to me. And hear me out. From what I know, from what a lot of the pros that I talk to, and they're like T-boys, they say this team is one of the least structured teams in the league. But they're all very talented, okay? And they just kind of go toe for toe with the gunny, So if you play that way, if you play into their game, they can beat you and they can roll you. And we kind of saw it. We saw flashes of it in the qualifiers, and then we also saw them get body bagged. So they just seem wildly inconsistent to me. I do think that they're in the same tier as the Guerrillas, as the Boston Breach, but this Florida Mutineers team has a way higher ceiling, I think, if they can play the game correctly fundamentally. Oh, Minnesota, my boys. Number 10, but they just barely didn't make the cut into the B tier. I have them in the C tier. The C tier is basically, they're going. I think they could win a series, and they won't get last. But at the same time, they could just get 3-0'd and be out of here. In my opinion, I think they have pacing issues. Their S&D is still solid. Their respawn, it's basically the Minnesota Rocker signature. You're good at S&D, and the other 2 modes, fuck it. Some days you can, compete and beat these other teams. And other days, you look like you guys have never played the map together in your lives. Number 11, NYSL, the Subliners. They did get a win versus Boston Breach. They turned it around. They picked up royalty for Neptune. Not sure how I feel about that move, and it hasn't really made much of a difference. They look kind of competitive versus the Atlanta FaZe, but once again, they're in the same tier as Minnesota, where I think they can maybe make a little noise, but I also think there's a good chance they just get bodied right out of the tournament in the first round. I just think more team changes need to happen if this team really wants an opportunity to contend at all this year. Shout out to the worst team in the league. It is the Paris Legion. I got them in the D tiers, not much else to say. Their ass. It's simple as that. Watch, they're probably going to make a run now, or I said that or something. But so that's the list, guys. I appreciate the love. Let me know in the comment section below who you think has the best chance at winning Major 1.